record on this computer. Yeah, and so this is the sleeve roll, the seam roll is just this is like a half-inch dowel that I just, they're like three little nails and glue that's on my point presser. So if I need to press a seam open or like a little sleeve or something, um, it's really the way to go. So, they don't take a lot of time to, um, there's not a lot of time or materials to make them, but they are going to be, they're going to be very useful when when you start pressing. And so yeah, I found those just with my regular iron seems to work just fine.
That's hysterical. A little ironing board. I love it.
Well, but if you think about it, pressing tools are key. Um,
Oh my God. The
yeah.
reliable iron. Where have I been
Oh,
all this?
have he got the reliable iron, folks, and isn't it just doesn't it just completely rock your world?
I iron a shirt like in 2 minutes. I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, I'm like, oh, so this is what it is like to have a dry cleaners.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah,
Good. Good.
yeah. Well, you see, the years ago when I worked for,
Yeah.
oh, that's beautiful. Did you make that?
It's no, I've got it suddenly. It's very vintage. I don't think it's even I don't know how many years, maybe a 50 years old one. And I've
Mhm.
got this one like $3. And I said, "Oh, what for? I don't need it." And my husband said, "If you'll get it, you will get the mini iron." And yes, next day I've got this one.
And see, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, but the reliable iron, when I worked my first job in San Francisco, the display shop and the tailor shop, it was one big room. They had half, we had half. And they had the whole dry cleaner set up with the gigantic boiler and the big bangle press and the iron. And I just remember when the old guys decided I was okay, one time, and this tells you like how long ago this was. It was when Vivian Westwood was doing the Buffalo Girls collection. So they had these just gigantic man-eating puff sleeves. And I was pressing a blouse that was a white cotton and, these gigantic, like size of your head puff sleeves. And I was having, I had my little janky iron over my little area. And the guy's just like, boy, bring that over here. And so I brought it over and they hung it up on their little hook. And one of them, he just kind of leaned over and he said, watch this. And he took the iron and he put it up in the armhole and he hit the switch and it went, it was that fast. And so, then they let me use their iron and it was, it ruined me for anything else. But the reliable iron is almost there. I mean, it is the best you can do without like investing in having a gigantic dry cleaning thing installed in your house, which would cost a fortune.
Well, the creases that it does, of course I did a practice run on some towels, and I said, "This is creasing towels." And then I started making a pair of trousers, and I did the shaping of it, like you see,
Yeah,
and
uh-huh. Yeah,
the curve. Oh my God! And then it's like you can slice through butter with those creases.
yeah,
I
yeah,
said, "Where have I been all this time?"
yeah. Well, you see, you eventually get there.
Hmm.
For a number of years, I used the gravity feed iron, and that was okay. But what I like is like being able to just get as much steam as you want for as long as you want, because the gravity feed iron eventually the heater the steam generates in the iron, and so if you have too much water running through it, it cools the iron down and then it starts spitting and sputtering. So that was my big that was that was my big complaint about the gravity feed iron. And where I learned about this, my husband was doing a production of Private Lives for the Pittsburgh Public Theater some years ago, and the wardrobe lady said, hey, you got to see this, they just got one. And she let him do a test drive on it, and he said to me, you have got to have one of these. So I did, and yes, there's nothing like the proper pressing tools. But I'm gonna have to. I have one of those little irons, so I'm gonna have to get it out and see how it works, pressing little seams because, you know, any pressing tools, you know, you can have an okay machine if you have good pressing tools. This is something I try to tell my students at FIT. You don't have to have, you know, they all think, oh, you got to get the big industrial. Like, actually, no, that only sews forward and backwards. And, you know, if you're if you're doing couture, you want a few more features. So, you know, get a, don't get the big hog industrial, get the big ass good iron. So questions. This is okay, because we have like one more session after this. And so tonight, the video tonight is really just like kind of the finishing up of this jacket. So what I was going to do after that, if everyone is amenable, because, you know, hey, why not? There was a request for the Balmain buttonhole. Does that sound like something everyone would like to know? And so next week, because you've seen this, right?
Can you show it, the Balmain buttonhole?
Yeah, I'm going to do that tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, because, you know, you paid for 6 sessions, so you should get 6 sessions. So you know, because earlier in the whole thing, I kind of doubled up some sessions, and so I have some extra time, and I thought, well, what the hell? So tonight will be the Balmain buttonhole, and then next week I can show you this. And the reason I'm talking about this right now, the email that I'm going to be getting you tonight, or supposed to be getting you tonight, I have been in computer hell this week. Monday, when I was editing all the video for this jacket, my computer started going really slow, which is never a good thing. And so I was just thinking, just please get this video done, just please. And so, yeah, I got the video done. I got it on the hard drive. I got it downloaded to YouTube. You know, it's like everything is like, okay, phew. And then I went and clicked on my email program and it just wouldn't open. And there were some other programs that just wouldn't open. And I thought, okay, what do I know to do here? And so, because I have a Mac, so I went and I got it was called Disk First Aid or something like that. That's all I know to do. So I ran that, didn't help. And so I said to myself, you know what I'm going to do now? I'm just going to shut this thing down and I'm going to take it to the professionals tomorrow. And so I went in Tuesday morning and he fired it up and he said, okay, this computer is from 2015. And I said, uh-huh, because I knew I'd had it for a while. And he said, you were like that close to this thing crashing. Because I had like used like I mean, there was like this big line of what was on there, and then there was this like sliver of like what was left. And he said, what you need, because I said I edit video and I edit audio and all of this. He said, what you need is like to come into the 21st century and not have the stone tablet and chisel with the big ass hard drive and the big ass, you know, and it's going to cost me a little money. And so what I said was, okay, what I want you to do, because you all know what you're doing, I want you to get me what you think I need. And then what I need for you to do is get all the information from this computer, because it's still there because it didn't crash, over to the new computer. And then I need you to call me and I'll come in with my credit card. So probably later in the week, you know, because my email is on that computer. This is my laptop. So, you know, this email with all of this may be a little bit delayed. And I apologize ahead of time for that because, you know, it's been making me kind of chew my nails. But, you know, the beauty of tech, but at least I got it. And he kind of said, you know, you really dodged a bullet here. You know, if you had pushed it even a little further, it would have been a disaster. And while I have things on Dropbox and Carbonite and all of that, not having anything crash and getting everything from one to the other is, I think, a more desirable outcome. So
yeah, 9 years you were pushing, because I kept my Mac for 10 years. When I moved abroad, I bought a brand new one.
Yeah,
kept on running, but after a while it just doesn't you can't upgrade it, you can't do anything to it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. And so, you know, that was my adventure in computer land this week. But I was, you know, if I really, I hate dealing with this stuff, but we have to. It's a part of the modern age. So yeah, I'm hoping that when I get this new one, it's going to run faster, because it was really, I just understood that, okay, something is not right here. And I'm just going to hire the person. I'm going to take it to the person they've done my computer stuff for quite a long time. I'm just going to take it over there and hear what they have to say. And that's what he had to say. And I'm like, okay, I kind of thought that, but so yes. So tonight we're on the laptop, and so here we are. So questions before we do the last little wrap up for tonight. And Vicky, I saw your email, and I can't, it's on the internet. So I'll try to look at it afterwards and see if I can try to answer your question on that. But can you ask the question here, or?
Well, the arm, the sleeve does not fit into the armhole in the back. I'm getting like a pucker right here.
Okay.
And I've been moving the arm in, the sleeve in and out and up, and I just can't get it to fit. So I just sent you a picture of my best attempt to see if you can tell me which way to shove the sleeve.
So is it rippling back here, but not?
Yes.
It's
rippling.
If you just bring just the cap forward, do you think that would work?
It won't, it doesn't work. The thing is that, I have a check, and so I'm really like anal retentive of trying to keep the check parallel to the thing. And so I can't push it enough. So the check is, the lines are going to be going.
Okay. So one thing you can try to do, because if it's a little bit puffy, is, I don't normally say, shave off the cap a little bit.
Oh, bring the cap down a little. All right.
That's one of those, like, that would be in this particular instance because what you want to do is you want to reduce the circumference in here enough so that it eases in slightly, and you don't want to shift the pitch of the sleeve because you have that plaid. Right. And so in that case, that's one of those times when you could really, and I would do it incrementally, like 1/8 of an inch at a time.
All right. You know what? I work with 1-inch seams or bigger.
Yeah.
But I said, oh, Kenneth always works with 5/8 of an inch. So of course I went in before I attempted the sleeve, I shaved down the armhole to 5/8.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, and now I'm like,
well, but it's not the armhole, it's in the sleeve. It's in the sleeve cap. I would leave the bodice alone, but you just shave the cap of the sleeve and really just.
Oh, okay. All right. I understand. All right. I'll try that.
And so what you can even do, you don't necessarily have to cut anything off just yet. What to do is take the thing out from here to here, up here. Yeah. And then just, figure out where the stitching line is now, and just chop, bring that down.
Yeah, I know. All right. So I've tried that, but maybe I went too far, because then I'm cutting off the circumference here, and then it's too tight.
Actually, if you keep it high, and you're dropping it really in this area. Don't come here.
Don't go down. All right, don't go down further.
Just across here, because what it sounds like is if you could kind of get it out of just like, say, like 1 inch on either side of that shoulder seam, that's not going to reduce the bicep here.
Right. Okay. You remember, the thing is that what's really, we pushed my the shoulder seam so far forward.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then we tipped the sleeve.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's throwing me off. Geometry is throwing me off. Yeah. But I will continue to try it. it's 4 days now.
Okay, I get that. Yeah.
Vicky, I get up and I go, I'm good. It's going to work today.
Yes. So,
Vicky, are you using the Jessica pattern?
Yes.
Yeah, because I'm having the same problem. I'm really struggling with the sleeves, and just like you. So I'll try that. So Kenneth, we kind of like bring it up a little bit by like 1/8 of an inch and baste it in.
Yeah. So you're going to kind of pick it up, where the seam would normally be 5/8, you could say like a 3/4 of an inch seam allowance on the cap. And
Okay.
that's gonna shorten, because what you're doing here is you're gonna be shortening that down
Mhm.
just slightly.
I'm also, steamed the heck out of it and trying to make sure I don't get puckers, and there's just so much gathering, and I don't know if it's just the pattern, that there's so much there.
Well, what fabric are you working with? I mean,
Work,
is it a pattern or is it a solid?
it's a solid, so I
Oh,
don't have her
okay.
pattern, so
Yeah.
I mean, her
So,
problem.
what you can do in that case, if it's a solid, what you can do is you can actually just drop the underarm down
Oh.
on the sleeve,
Okay.
and that's going to reduce the circumference up here. And if you're not having to worry about a plaid, which is what she's worried about,
Mm-hmm.
and the general rule is the shift is half of the total that you need to remove. So if you need to remove a half inch, which is kind of a lot for cap ease, if you just drop the whole underarm of the sleeve a quarter of an inch, 2 times a quarter is a half, that's going to get rid of a total of a half inch cap ease.
Okay.
And so you won't have to shave it. See, I try to avoid shaving it off up here whenever possible.
Mhm.
But in Vicky's case, you want the lines to all
Oh.
match, so you kind of have to. But
Okay.
and see, this is something that what I would encourage you to do is go back and look at your pattern, because what I have found, if you measure the seam line of the bodice armhole and the seam line of the sleeve armhole, I have found the sweet spot. The sleeve should be an inch to inch and an eighth larger than the bodice armhole. Anything more than that, you're going to start getting gathers.
Okay. I got a spot for the sit and sew it gorgeous fabric,
Oh yeah.
and you had said that I could do the sleeve draft.
Yes.
So if I'm still having problems with this, I'm
Absolutely.
gonna bring it there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Okay. So other questions, comments, thoughts, hopes, fears, dreams, desires? Crickets, crickets. Everyone's just, yeah. For those who came in late, I just have to show her again because I really do love Bella's new outfit. Someone sent me this perfectly scaled leopard print, and Bella is a leopard print sort of gal, and so I happen to have this fabric that went with it. So, yeah, I'm like I said, yeah, that was my calming. After I got back from the computer place, I busted out the little doll patterns and the little fabric and started making Bella.
I have a question now
Yeah.
that I think of it. All right, so I like to watch Taylor YouTube videos or whatever, or and they've been showing a lot of cutting, but they don't seem to leave a lot of seam allowance, and I just don't get it.
Well,
When they're cutting, you see them they trace the pattern, and then they leave such a small seam allowance.
mhm,
On some of this, on most of the seams, I would say.
yeah.
I
Well,
don't understand how they do that. If there's going to be multiple fittings and they go, oh, we'll have to do this and this, but they have they have no fabric to work with.
I wish I could answer that one. To me, it would make it would make me very nervous to
Because they were worried about like this, the fabric is so expensive. So they try to get the pieces as close as they can. So I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know how there's more disasters, or they're just such good measurers that they're never going to be more than an eighth of an inch off.
That could be. Yeah.
No?
There are people, and this is something I watch with my teacher, Simone. She had kind of a sixth sense about things. And so, there were certain things that she just could look at and she knew, and she could draft it and she knew. She used to say, you should get it in one shot. I never was able to get something in one shot. I like making a muslin. I like, having a little bit extra on the seam allowances. It's just a different way of working. And I look at Susan Calgie. She gives a good 1.5 inches, 2 inches sometimes.
That's what I do. Yeah.
And so, it's a different way of working. I think that's what they do every day, all the time. They've been doing it for hundreds of years. They have their thing down. And also they make, there are particular kinds of garments they make all the time.
all the time.
And so
Right.
they've kind of got it down to where they know that, okay, this is how we cut it. We know it's going to turn out. And, if there's anything, we can kind of fix it. That's the best answer I can give you on that.
Well, I'm impressed
Yeah.
at them.
I wish I could do it too, but I know my limitations, and I like to have extra fabric there because I want that insurance.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Other questions?
Yes. Did you mention this book before?
No. Who is that? The Thomas von Nordheim? Yeah.
Yes.
It has a new cover now. It's an excellent book.
Mm-hmm.
He himself is interesting. That's all I'm going to say about that. But I think there's some really good information in that book. The collar that we show here is the one that he shows in the book. So, and
Thank you, because it's getting new look when after your classes, I'm looking in this book like totally different feeling.
Yes.
What he is doing.
Yeah.
Because before I was thinking, oh my God, it's kind of old fashioned style or something, but no, now I can see all details, and yeah, thank you so much.
Well, the thing is, you mentioned this about, using old things in style. A lot of it is style, like this jacket here. I've told you, I started with a Saint Laurent jacket that actually made me look like I have shoulders and a waist, which is a miracle. And so, understanding these techniques, you can bend it towards any aesthetic. I think some of the things that he's made in that book can look a little bit dated, but he did some of the clothes for that movie Phantom Threads. And did anyone see that movie? Yeah, I thought it was kind of a weird movie, but the thing I was disappointed by, but I kind of understand why they did it, was the clothes. The clothes were kind of generic 50s sort of Dior new look-ish kinds of clothes, but they weren't, it wasn't like Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris where, you want to see Dior. The story was not about the clothes. The story was about something else. So, that I think that might be why his clothes, worked for that movie, or whatever ended up in that book, because that wasn't the point of the movie, was the clothes, which, for me, it's a friend of mine used to ask me, he said, do you ever go to a movie for plot? I'm like, why? No, you go for the clothes. Yes, one time, my friend Stuart, may he rest in peace, took me to see Francois Truffaut's The 400 Blows. Has anyone ever seen it? Like watching paint dry. It's just, oh my God, it's in black and white. And it's this kid from the wrong side of the tracks in France. And there were all of these long, slow, loving, grainy pan shots of birch bark on trees and weathered buildings. It was like, oh, this is like torture. And when it was over, my friend said, so what'd you think? I was like, well, they could have lost 20 minutes with all those long, slow, loving, grainy pan shots of the glory that is France. And, that would have been great. And that's when he said, do you ever go? And I was saying there were no costumes really. And that's when he said, do you ever go for plot? No, it's all about the clothes. So, yeah. Okay, so other questions before we get to tonight's work, because the first video is like 6 minutes. It's kind of like, okay, we're finishing this up, and then we're going to charge into the Balmain buttonhole because it's a cool looking buttonhole. So if there are no questions, then let us begin. So finishing finishing an outro. There we are. And as always, if you have questions, probably won't have any questions on this one, but the next one, do speak out. So let's go.
The next step
hang on.
we need to do is to create an opening in the facing on this side.
Wrong one. Let me just put that aside. And, oh, here we are. So can everyone see this? Yes? And everyone can,
Now can.
no, okay, that's,
Yeah.
so let me just stop sharing and try that over again. So, okay. Technology, sometimes it's really, oh,
We were able to see it.
Yeah,
Oh.
we were able to see it.
oh, okay, well, so here we are again. Okay, so here we go.
Here we have the jacket ready for finishing. What I want to do first is to take most of the basting out, especially in this area here, because I want to have the buttonholes worked. So you don't want to catch the basting thread in the buttonhole. So I'm not going to make you watch me take all this basting out. I will take the basting out, I will bring the jacket back, and we will continue from there. Now, as you can see, I have removed almost all of the basting, but the one exception is here. Now, what I've done, you can see here, I have marked buttonhole placement. I'm going to have these buttonholes worked, so you mark on the back of the facing. So I've basted around here to keep all of the layers, facing and body, completely together so that nothing shifts when they're making the buttonholes. I've also on the cuffs, I have marked buttonhole placement because as a surgeon's cuff, you want them to actually work. So I've decided to go with 2 because I just felt like it. And here you can see I'm using the button from the pattern and then a second button that I'm making these 4 inches apart. So my next step is going to be taking this out to have the buttonholes worked, and I will bring you back the results. And we're back from having the buttonholes made. So I was marking, actually, the wrong side for me. I was marking on the ladies' side, so when I went to the buttonhole place, they said, "Are you sure?" So I've had machine worked buttonholes. You can work them by hand. Also, I have them on the cuffs for the surgeon's cuff. So really, as you can see over here, I have buttons. At this point, it's really a matter of sewing the buttons on and doing a final press. Now, one last final piece when we're pressing. These are what are called sleeve shapers. And as you can see, it's hardwood with a spring. So what I like to do is I'm going to slip this up into the sleeve. You want to reach down. You want to keep it compressed until you get the whole sleeve on it. It's a little noisy. And so here is what it looks like. I'm sorry. And so what we can do here then is this is where you get your good steamer out. And so here, I'm going to let this cool. Then we'll go back to the table. At the table, I have some still photos here. So what you can see first is the lining back. The lining is all hand installed. You can see the center back pleat right in the center of the photograph. Then we also have the hand installed sleeve lining. It is installed after the lining itself goes in. Looking down the jacket, we have the side vents. And from this view, you can see what's called the vent stay. The vent stay actually limits the movement of the underlaps to keep a tidy appearance when you're wearing the garment. Moving right along, you can see the join between the lining and the facing is piped, and there is also a hidden lining pocket. Now, looking at the jacket on the form, you can see just how yummy this fabric is. And you can see in this photo here, the peaked lapel, you can see the single welt pocket. You could also see the double welt pockets with the flaps near the hip. And as we turn around, you can see the pocket flap much better. And from the back, there are those side vents, quite attractive. With details, there is the single welt pocket and the double welt pocket. Moving on, you can see the cuff, the surgeon's cuff with the buttons, and the double welt pocket with the flap. And the big finish is the peak lapel, which I rather like. Now, you have gotten with me this far. You have done a lot of work, so I don't have to say there's more work to do, because there's not. I thank you for taking this class, and I hope you've enjoyed it.
Kenneth,
Yes.
where would you get the sleeve, that sleeve pressing tool?
Oh, those, you can get them at drycleaningsupply.com.
Okay.
I think they're called sleeve shapers. They're not a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things that I like to have them, because if there's a tool, I want it. I also use them, like if I'm steaming a jacket, just a regular jacket, you know, one of my, if I have a jacket that's been, because my wardrobe, you know, my jackets are all kind of smashed into limited space, this being New York. So if I really want to make the jacket look good, I just hang it up on the little chain thing and slip the sleeve shapers in, and with that wonderful iron, you know, give it a good steam, and it just crisps those sleeves right up. I learned about that in my, again, back at Roos Brothers 100 years ago. The old guy, the old trimmer Dave, who was 110 at the time, he taught me about the sleeve shapers and why you need them. And the one thing I wish I had stolen, there were what were called cuff blocks, and they were these sort of kind of oval wooden weights that were on springs. And what you would do is you would squeeze it, and you would put the cuff block inside the cuff and let it open out. And so it would shape the cuff perfectly. And I know, and it was one of those things that, damn it, you know, because you can't keep everything. You can't get everything. And if I had realized at the time that, you know, you're never going to be able to find these again, because that's one of those old school things that I just have not seen since. I would have stolen a pair, just because, you know, I'm of a larcenous turn of mind.
Are they called cuffed clams? I'm seeing it on that dry cleaning site. There's something called cuff clams.
That could be it. If, you know, did they have a picture of it?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it looks like it looks like two things that are shaped, but
let me get one for you here. One moment, please. Oh, there we are. Yeah, so this is,
that's that one.
yeah, this is what it looks like, you know,
Right.
and it has the curve, and it's, you know, it's a leaf spring. So as you saw in the video, you just kind of slip them up into the sleeve, and they pop out as far as the sleeve will allow them to. And if there's a taper, it follows the taper. And so how much are they on that site?
Well, I mean, those are called wooden sleeve expanders,
There you
and
are.
they're like between $6 and $12.
Not bad.
Nothing, no, nothing. But they have these things called cuff clams. Like the thing, what were you talking about, the thing with the cuff?
Yeah. You know, I'll have to go have a look, but yeah, because I you know, if they do have them there, I'm gonna go and buy them, because I really, you know, they just made, because old Dave, I learned a lot of pressing from old Dave, and one of the things that he hated, and I did it only one time because they really ripped me one for it, was like on a lapel, I made the crucial sin of pressing a fold there. And he busted me so bad. He said it's called a roll line, not a crease line. And so how he would prepare a jacket, he really press so that the lapel would come out in this really nice high curve. So the little cuff blocks, that was part of his repertoire, as well as these sleeve things. So
what was the name of that website again?
Is it cleanersupply.com? What?
Correct, correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And Mary, if you're interested in getting the reliable iron, they have the best price.
Okay.
And on top of it, just as for your information, they have the best service too, because I finally wore mine out, and I knew something was up when it was blowing the breaker. And so I figured, kind of like the computer, like, okay, you just have to man up and get another one because you've had this a good long time and it's given you plenty of good service. So I ordered one and they sent it and it didn't work. So I called and I said, I have a problem here. And, I plugged it in. It doesn't seem to be heating up. I checked the reset button. I think I have a problem here. And you know what the guy said? He said, we will send another one out FedEx today, and we'll send a return ticket tag in that one so that, you unpack the new one, you put the old one in this box, you slap that label on it, and we'll pick it up for you. So they have excellent service as well.
What is the model number on the iron that you use?
I think this is the 500i. It's a 500i or 600i. It's big. It's going to be, I want to say it was like $1,100 or something. It was not cheap.
I use a Rowenta steamer and I could upgrade.
As I have this hate relationship with Rowenta, because there seems to be, and I've known about Rowenta machines ever since I kind of started this whole teaching thing, and everyone complains that they leak. And for like 35 years, they leak. Like, how can they stay in business?
My steamer doesn't leak.
Well, you may have hit the jackpot on that one. But yeah. So I, with Rowenta, I kind of tell people, if people say I bought a Rowenta, I just kind of go, oh.
Well, regular irons, I agree. They leak from the day you buy them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was at a quilt show a couple of weeks ago, and they were trying to sell, I think it was Laurel Star irons, and it was an ironing board system. Now, go reliable. And do you use a reliable ironing board or just a regular board?
Regular board. Because see, with pressing, I really kind of love the whole pressing thing. So we're going to talk about it for a few minutes. The thing about pressing, the point is that we probably talked about this before, is to put heat and moisture into the fabric to soften the fibers, and then you want to draw the heat and the moisture away from the fabric. And so what I found, because at FIT, we have the vacuum boards, which they're okay, I guess. But if you have a wooden surface, because my pressing table, it's bare wood, and then I have like 3 or 4 layers of bump cloth. You could also use an old wool blanket. If you have an Army Navy surplus, or if you have like a wool blanket that's kind of moth-eaten, you can use that as your pad. You want natural fibers. And then I use cotton duck as a cover, and I change it frequently. So you have the natural fibers, so the heat goes in and it does its work on the fabric, and then the natural fibers draw everything out. So you don't really need that vacuum table.
I think that the table is something I need to think through too, because I had just a large ironing board, and I was putting so much steam through it, it rusted and fell to the ground, which is, kind of dangerous. So I bought a Teflon iron board cover. Yeah.
No, because what Teflon, I learned this from Sandra Betsina. What Teflon will do is bounce everything back up. Okay. And so, the thing is, it has to flow through. It can't go in and bounce back up, because, you don't get as good of a press. You don't get as good of a result.
So like cotton duck, wool blanket, maybe wool felt, something like that.
Yeah. natural fiber. That's the thing. Or, you know, like I said, what I have, there is a fabric. It's kind of hard to find, but this is back when I lived in San Francisco, and I had my downstairs neighbor was a gal named Laurel Sprigg. Laurel Sprigg made couture home furnishings, like couture drapes. There was one time she did this set of 10 panels for this like 12-foot windows, and they were a silver and gold shot satin taffeta, and it had these, it was edged with a 5-inch fringe of Swarovski crystals. That's what she made. And so she always used this fabric called bump cloth. It's like a thin cotton blanket. It's a drapery interfacing. And so since, you know, she cut things to different widths, I always got the scraps. So that's what I have padding my pressing table is the bump cloth. So it's cotton, you know, but cotton wool, they'll work. And, you know, I don't know if you have to, do you, it looks like you have a dedicated sewing space, right?
I do. Oh, yeah.
You know, do consider, let's see if I can make this. I don't know if you can see there's, well, it's covered with all sorts of things, but you can see I have, there's my beautiful iron. I have a table, and if you have the book Cool Couture, I think in it I have the blueprint for this table. It's 38 inches high because I like a 38-inch high table. It's 60 inches wide by 24 inches deep. And it has, you know, the top on it. It has the shelf below, so you can put all sorts of other necessary things.
Yeah, that sounds nice. That sounds like a really good idea, table. Because I get nervous if my dog walks anywhere underneath the ironing board now, because I'm afraid it's going to break again. And
so you know, it's something that you can, you know, find someone, a handyman or someone who's kind of handy with, you know, this one. I had a neighbor who was a woodworker in my first studio in San Francisco, and he just, you know, I just drew him what I wanted, and you know, it took him like a day and a half to make. So you know, that
I did this, I made this. I did, and you get the guys at the Home Depot. I mean, I bought the piece and then I had them cut. Actually, it was this times two, so they cut me 2 of them, and then I just wrapped it in like cotton, my batting from my quilting, and then covered it with this. And so this was another thing. I was like, how did I get along without a big pressing board? And so this is where I do all of my shaping and all of my things. So you can make it yourself, and you get a staple gun and just staple it to the back, and it's done. It was like $1.298.
And so
well, thanks for the tips. Yeah,
because
appreciate it.
and so then you can have the different, see, I have like the sleeve board. I also have a little ironing board if I need, you know, something ironing board shaped that I can set on there. So it's I think going to make your life easier. As someone who's, you know, had at one time had to manage the ironing board, because they can fall over, or you can knock the iron off and then the iron falls on the floor. And so with this, you could even kind of plan it so that you have you know, have a little extension thing for the boiler for the iron. Yes.
I have a question about the surgeon's sleeve cuff.
Surgeon's cuff, yeah.
I follow a tailor who's in Hong Kong. He's really nutty, but he's hysterical. But he has one. I can't remember the terminology used, but it's like it's turned up. And what's the name of that? It's a type of it's a finished surgeon's cuff, but it has a turn up.
You know that I don't know the name of that. I just always assumed that was just called a surgeon's cuff and it was turned up.
Oh, okay. Because I didn't know if you did that, if that was in your arsenal of patterns, if you've ever done that in your class.
What you would do is you would make the opening deeper. I think we made the opening 3 inches. You can make the opening deeper so that you could then get it to turn up.
Oh, okay.
I think the pattern making is pretty much the same. Now I see Beverly has a question. What determines whether a keyhole or straight buttonhole is used? I tend to like a keyhole for tailoring, and is the buttonhole on the lapel always parallel to the upper edge? Not necessarily. That's one of those things that I'm sure there might be a rule to it, but I just kind of center it. sometimes, but other times I run it parallel to the upper edge. So what I would say is you could just like with your, use some basting thread and baste it to see, do you like it here? Do you want it parallel to the upper edge? That is a personal taste thing, but the keyhole, I just like the keyhole buttonholes on tailor garments because the little keyhole part accommodates the shank of the button, and I think it makes the button pass through the buttonhole more easily. So that there you are, Beverly. That is your answer. So so other questions? Okay, so the Balmain buttonhole. Yay! Okay, there's the Balmain buttonhole. Here we are. Yes. And so just a little backstory on this before we get rolling. There is the museum. Well, there's the TWA terminal at JFK that they turned into a hotel. So I was there one day waiting for a flight, and they had all of these flight attendant uniforms there. And so that's where I first came to know this. And so that's where this particular buttonhole came from. And so this is my take on it. But so here we are. So yeah, and give me, questions as we go.
Pierre Balmain designed flight attendant uniforms for TWA in the early 1960s. I was at the TWA hotel at JFK where they had an exhibit, and that's where I first saw this buttonhole. As you can see in this photo of a Vogue pattern envelope from that time, Balmain used this detail on a lot of things, so it seems to be a signature detail for him. What I've decided to do is to put my own take on the buttonhole, and that is what I'm presenting here. This is my version of the Balmain buttonhole. It is inspired by the TWA flight attendant uniforms from the 60s that Pierre Balmain, the couturier, designed. And I gave it a little twist by making it an angle on the end. This is what we're going to be making, and we have a lot of work to do, so let's get busy. So let's talk materials for just a moment. This particular piece, which we have block fused with the fusible, is going to be the front of the sample. This is going to be the facing. This piece here is going to be the welt unit. And we want to cut a piece out of shirt weight woven interfacing. Now, this is terribly crucial. When I was doing the research on this, I found that Pellon doesn't work for this. You want a woven. So let me show you what I have produced. I have a little diagram here that shows what we're going to be making and the proportions. So what you can see here, you can see the line all the way to the right would represent the cut edge of the fabric. You can see that I've actually called out the seam line. I've also called out the center front line. The important thing here is you need the center front line because that is one of the ends of the buttonhole opening. Now you can see from the center front line to the point on the buttonhole, that will be the opening of the buttonhole, and that measures the diameter of the button plus 1/8 of an inch. The width of the buttonhole, I'm making 1 inch, so the welts are 1/2 inch each. But you can make this any size you want. The strip for the welt unit that's going to sew to this will be 4 times the finished width plus 1/4 inch. So that's what you're looking at here. So this here, this is the illustration that I talked about earlier. This is 3.5 inches wide by 5.5 inches long. And you can see that I've drawn the illustration on here. This is the end of the buttonhole. The button will go through the opening here. So this will fuse to the back of the fabric. But first, let me talk about this one here. This is the double welt unit. This is about 5 inches long, and the width is 4 times the finished width of the opening. And in this case, it's going to be a 1-inch opening. So 4 times 1 inch is 4 inches plus 1/4 of an inch for turn of cloth. So this is 4 1/4 inches this way and about 5 inches or so along the lengthways. Now I've drawn a line centered on the wrong side of this fabric because we're going to eventually be splitting this into 2, but we'll get to that later. So here we have the facing, we have the welt unit, we have the interfacing, and now really I just want to thread baste this mark here. This mark on the front of the garment, as you can see, block fused on the back. This represents where the 2 welts come together. So I'm going to go off camera and just sew a line of thread basting there for reference. I'll bring it right back. Almost done. And we don't have to secure this thread because this has to hold just long enough to get the fusible on the back. So that is what it looks like from the front. This is what it looks like from the back, minus the little lint there. Now, before we fuse the interfacing piece to the back of the body, there's one little move I like to do. What I'm doing here, I have a bright orange thread in here because it just shows up. And this, the beauty of this is that we will not have it show on the front of the garment. So what we're doing here is we're stay stitching this angle with a very short stitch, like a 0.5 to 0.75 stay stitch. Okay. Out of the machine and explain. So what we have here, as you can see, we begin and end on these stitching lines. This is an extremely short stay stitch. I like to sew this before I fuse it because this then will stay the end, but it will not read through to the front. It's going to make your life so much easier. So now I'm going to go off camera, trim these ends, and then I will meet you back at the pressing table. So here we are. This is the line. We're actually going to line up with this here. Really the easiest way is just to fold it in half. As you can see the line that's drawn and center that onto the thread tracing. Now for something like this, because you don't want to dislodge it, you want it to be accurate. This is one of those times where you put the silk organza on to keep it from shifting. So we let it cool for a moment. And now this is where I'm going to talk a moment about, you notice that I have pinked these edges. Pinking the edges of your fusible will make it so that a hard line will not read through to the front of the fabric later. It's just a good little thing to know. Now that this is fused onto the main body, we go back to the work table. As you can see, we removed the thread basting. So now we bring in the strip. So this wrong side of the fabric, so right side of the fabric to the right side of the fabric. Now the object here is you want that line to sit right on this line. So this is where you pin baste. There's one. There's two. If you get it a tiny bit off center, it's not going to totally kill you, but be accurate. It'll just make your life easier later. Okay. So we have the two pinned together, ready for stitching. This means back to the sewing machine. So at the machine, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sewing first this line and then this line, stopping at these two intersections here. Now, we'll use a regular 2.5 stitch to about 3/4 of an inch from the end. Then we're going to shorten the stitch to 0.5 down to here. We'll do the same thing here as well. Now I've changed the thread to a blue, just so you can see what it looks like, because obviously you would color match your thread if this were for real. So now, let me just zoom in here. Standard 2.5 stitch to begin. About 3/4 of an inch or so down, shorten that stitch to 0.5. And you stop directly on that stitching line. So now let me remove this, and we will sew the other one in the same direction. Sewing them in the same direction keeps any kind of twists from happening. So back to the 2.5 stitch. And 0.5. And you can also bring this over just to make sure everything is square. You stop right on that thread. Okay, so let me take the work out of the machine, show you the results. Take these pins out now. They have done their job. So I will trim the threads and meet you back over at the work table. I'm showing you this trimming guide to illustrate what we're going to be doing in the next step. Now, the blue lines are between 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch from the center line, depending on the thickness of the fabric. So thinner fabrics will get 1/16, thicker fabrics will get 1/8. So now we're going to draw these two lines. What this does here, this is going to give us 1/8 of an inch between the cut edges, because we will be trimming this out. But accuracy really is important. So there I have drawn the two lines. So now what I will do is come in, I'm just cutting through the body. I'm not cutting through the strip underneath just yet. So you want to cut along these lines. because we're going to be removing this excess from the seam allowances so that when we fold the welts up and over, they'll have space to sit into. It won't create a jam or a bind. So that then is the first step. Then I like to clip right to that corner and right to this corner. Just up to the stitching, not past. And this is where you're darn glad you have all these short stitches. And then finally, I'm going to come back here and cut along the pencil line. So cutting along the pencil line is going to separate this one large piece into two different wells. So that's what it will look like. This is actually the face of the fabric. And this is what it's going to look like from the back. Now, before we go press, that little space between the two, you can see we have excess hanging out on both sides. We need to trim those so that the green actually matches the white. So the easy way to do that is to fold this over. There we are. And this is where the rotary cutter is going to be your best friend. You come in here with the rotary cutter and just come right next to that seam allowance. So then fold this over, fold this back this way. And trim these.
Yes.
This one the same.
So just wondering, as you're doing this trimming in this point, could you have avoided this
No.
by just cutting? Because there's a reason why later
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because see, I try, I understand where you're seeing it, but what I discovered in the first iterations of this is not trimming this created a traffic jam. The two welts didn't actually meet. They sort of wanted to overlap. So I needed to get that little excess out of there.
But I'm just wondering about the math of it, because you did lines, like you did a 1/16 of an inch on either side of the center cut line.
Right.
Then you're eventually going to be trimming that off.
Well, no, actually what we're doing is, we're see the white, that's what we trimmed out to begin with, but on the welts, we then needed to trim those so that they matched the interface lines.
Okay.
And so, it's just one of those things I like I said, in the early iterations of this, when I was just cutting everything and folding it, everything just didn't sit as nicely as it did. And I realized it needed that little bit of breathing room between those cut edges on the seam allowances for the fabric, because the fabric is going to kind of come up and over these folded edges here. So when the fabric folds up and over, it actually takes up the space that was occupied by what we've trimmed out here.
Okay.
Did that make sense?
I'll trust the process.
Okay. So are there any other questions before we continue? Okay, then, but let us continue.
So you make them both the same. Yeah. Just have a look at it. I'm going to clean that up a little bit before I take that over to the sewing machine or the pressing table. So as you can see, we have just that 1/8 of an inch between those two cut edges. That is as it should be. Our next stop is the pressing table. the first step is press everything as sewn. And so then we want to press these open. So it's easier if you're using seam roll. So I'm going to bring this strip in like so, and I'm going to open up these seam allowances. Press them open, and then I'm going to turn this over so that the width of the cut edge matches the rest of the seam allowances. So that's going to create one of the welts.
Kenneth, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
The seam roll that you're using, is that bare wood or is that the bump cloth?
Well, this is just thin muslin on the railing.
Okay.
Yeah, because see, on a seam roll, I want a rigid surface. I don't want it to be cushiony or anything. So what you're seeing here is just thin muslin stitched around the seam roll.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so other questions? Okay, back to work.
Like so. Now let's do the other side. Bring this up. Press this open. Like so. Voila. So now we have both of these pressed this way. The next step is to press it over itself. Actually, I'm going to remove this for the other one so you can see it better. So you want to press, the seam allowance goes up and over the cut edge. So now let me just zoom in here to show you.
And I'm going to stop right here. See, Scott, that's now they want to sit right next to each other. That's why I needed to remove that 1/8 of an inch.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Result.
Oh, I get it.
See,
Yeah.
this folds right on that cut edge. And then these will sit together.
Because it was bumpy
The
before.
final garment.
Yeah, it just, there was just a little bit of it was just too much without that 1/8 of an inch that I needed to trim out. Because this is one of those times where I think I did 10 of these before I really got one that I liked. And it was just that I just needed to remove that excess out of there, and it gave me a better result. Okay, so
now we're ready for the next step, which is basting. Now you can see that I have made the mark right here. That is the mark that's the end of the buttonhole. You go back to your pattern for that. So what I want to do on the end closest to the raw edge is a slip stitch. You just want to slip stitch this together. It's like a basting, because ultimately we will sew it by machine, but to get it in the game, we want to slip stitch it to hold it together. Okay, so now that we're here at the end, I just want to stitch it a couple of times because I want that to be my marker for later, knowing that when I machine stitch, I stop there. And from here, I just want to whip stitch both of these edges closed so that they sit next to each other nicely. and stay there for the duration of the construction. This is one of these times, don't skimp on your basting, because if you skimp on your basting, it's going to tell on you later.
So true.
Yes.
So now when I'm stitching, what I'm looking for is that point. I'm going to stitch a little past that point with the whip stitches and then whip stitch 2 or 3 times. You don't want to whip stitch right on the point. You want to whip stitch just a little past there. So there we go. Okay. Now you're just catching the welch. You're not catching anything else. Okay. We're secure. Here, what we want to do is open this up, and we're going to sew this seam. See, there is the mark where we end the stitching, and the stitching line is going to be ever so slightly back of the slip stitch, say about a 1/16 of an inch. You want to give it a little bit of air. So when we stitch, you can see there is your basting. It's about 1 millimeter in from there. So we will go over to the machine now to sew this. As you can see, I have on my trusty generic adjustable zipper foot. So really, the object here is we just want to sew ever so slightly to the right of our thread basting, our slip stitching. And it's a standard 2.5 stitch. And back tack. And so now let me take this out of the machine. Show you what that looks like. Obviously, you will trim your threads. And so when I open it up, let me just. So this is what it looks like from this side. And once I take the basting out, it's going to look a little better. Our next step is going to be securing these pieces to the seam allowances. We secure each one of these separately. So what I'm going to do is bring this back, fold it there. And yeah, you have enough. If it doesn't go all the way out, that's great. You know, you have a little extra there. So really, the object here with just a standard stitch and the zipper foot is to come in and just sew just to the right of the previous stitching. So these to there. And then what I will do is turn this way so you can see what I'm up to. So I've sewn this one here. And so now I just want to fold this one back.
Kenneth,
Yes.
is it important to machine stitch it? Could you do a hand stitch?
You could.
Because it doesn't have to, it's only trying to get 2 layers together, right?
Right. So yeah, you could sew it by hand if you're more comfortable doing that. I just
Right.
like to use it by machine because see, any kind of bound buttonhole, I'm always worried that it might tear loose. So
Right.
a machine stitch feels a little more secure to me, but if you sew a very short hand stitch, you'll be fine.
Thank you.
Okay.
And so, again, let me draw out a little bit, show you the results. So on this side, at this point, this is what we have. This we're going to deal with later. Now here we are. Now this is where you're going to be extremely glad that you sewed that stay stitching, because this is where it comes in. So you want to start the clip here, but we turn it over, bring that down, and then when you clip right up to that stitch. See the object here. Next, we're going to press that one way, and we're going to press this the other way. So what that looks like, see if I can do this facing the camera. One way, this the other. Just zoom in on that so you can see. Sorry. So you can see I pressed these open. So now I can lay this down on top and turn it over. And it's starting to look like something. Throw this on top and give it a good press this way. So yeah, starting to take shape. So next, we work both of these one at a time. So I'm going to fold this back to reveal that one there. And I will come in with a needle and thread. It's easier if you hold it. Come in with the needle and thread and just sew that in place, because I'm going to eventually stitch it on the machine. But you want to sew it in place so that it doesn't shift, because shifting will just look, well, shifty. Okay, now those stitches don't have to be pretty, they just have to hold. So let me just fold this back, have a look at it. Yeah, looking pretty good. So now we're going to go over to the machine. So we're going to start sewing right there, and we're going to sew right down to there. Now you notice I'm using the adjustable zipper foot again. And so what I want to do, I just want to make sure that the needle is right at the edge. Right at the edge. So there we are. You can start a little past the seam to get a little running start, and you hold your threads because you're really going to need it. 0.5 stitch. So right on that orange stay stitch, or slightly in, sew off like so. There we are. So you can see we sewed off like this. Now we'll go back to the pressing table and set up the other side. So as before, we're going to fold back this side here. And I have the needle and thread again. And so we want to sew this side, seam allowances together. And again, it doesn't have to be a pretty stitch, it just has to hold. Here we are. And so, just to look at it this way, yeah, we'll go back to the machine to sew the other side. So as you can see, I have the needle on the other edge of the foot. I have folded back the work here. And so the object, again, is to start a little bit past where the stitching line begins. And you want the needle right up next to it. And again, stitch length is 0.5. Survey the results. And there you go. After a nice press, that will all crisp up beautifully. So back to the pressing table. I've removed all of the thread basting. And just a little steam. Some finger pressing. And it's starting to look like something. I'll go in later and press under there to flatten all of that out. But first, now we want to trim out these seam allowances. So now those are trimmed out. I can come back in here and give a good press. Now I will let this dry and then turn it over and show you the result. And here is the result. Next, I'm going to go off camera and sew the facing on. There's no mystery to that. You would sew whatever facing you apply to your jacket and press. So I will bring back the work with the facing attached. I have the facing sewn on and edge stitched. It's going to press back like this, but you have a little bit of bulk here. So what I have done, I've worked ahead. It's just good to see this. You want to trim out as much of this as you can, because if you can avoid any more bulk on that seam allowance, that's a good thing. So now that this is trimmed out, I can press the facing in place and I will come back with those results. And here we have the results. On both sides. The next step we need to do is to create an opening in the facing on this side so that this can be a working buttonhole. Once the facing is in place in its final position, you want to pin the layers down temporarily because we want to create an opening for the button. So from here, I'm going to turn this over and you can feel this area here. That's where the buttonhole is. Now, to make sure that I've centered the organza, about this far in is the one of the ends of the buttonhole. This is the other one. And now I'm going to just pin the organza through just the facing, not all layers. Once I have this pinned, I can turn this over. We want one pin on the end. We want the other pin at the opposite end where the button opening. So between the two pins here, that is the buttonhole opening. And then I'm going to flip this back over so you can see. There we are. Now that we have that, I like to mark first one dot here and one dot here. Now that I've marked the two dots, I can remove the pins. And this is where I'm going to draw my stitching line for the opening. So roughly 1/8 of an inch above these two dots. And then roughly 1/8 of an inch below. So it's about 1/4 of an inch, can be a little less. Like so. And then we can round off these ends. Shift that over just a bit. There we are. Okay. And from here, we can unpin from the back. Take all of these pins out. And then open this out like so. Now, this is going to be the opening. It's going to face this. We're making a faced opening with the silk organza. Our next stop is the sewing machine. So now, as you can see, we have the darning foot on the machine. Dropped the feed, so that means we can hand guide it. Notice I'm starting along the long line. Don't start this on the end. And the slower you move it, the shorter the stitch. So you want a short stitch here. Now, trim the thread. So we have an extremely short stitch. From here, we go to the pressing table. Now, we open up this by clipping to the stitching. So, to give you a closer look, okay. From here, first we want to press it as sewn. We'll make it sit better. And then I'm going to turn this right side, turn it everything through the opening. So we're making a faced opening with the silk organza. And let me flip this over. So here, the object here is we want to press it so that the seam allowances roll slightly to the back. So that when we sew this, we're going to hand sew this to the back of the buttonhole. The object is that we don't see the silk organza. And you use silk organza because it does not add any bulk or minimal bulk. So that's pressing, and there we are. Faced opening. Now to finish, we'll go back to the work table. Now, before we sew these together, you can come in here and trim out a lot of this organza. You don't really need it. It served its purpose. So there's that. So from here, we're going to put these two, one on top of the other. And so I'd like to pin one end first, match that. Match the opposite end. And then come in here. You just make sure that the organza rolls. So there's there. And here. Now, when you're sewing, you want to start in the middle and work your way around. Don't start at the ends. So I have my needle and thread. Color match the thread, obviously, to your fabric. And this is really just a slip stitch. No mystery here. So I'm not going to make you watch me sew this whole thing, but let me just get up there so you can see we're sewing that. So I will go off camera and sew all the way around to here, and bring you back the results. Almost finished. So then you want to secure the thread. Bury the end. And trim. Okay, so now let's turn this over, shall we, and have a look at the results. So here you have, let me give it another little bit of steam before I do the beauty shot, but there you have your button hole and the opening. Voila. And here you have the finished buttonhole. Now the button I've chosen is a little smaller than I normally would use, but I think it's pretty. So that's why I put it on here. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson, and I look forward to seeing you in other classes.
And there you have it.
How long did that take you to figure it out? How many renditions?
Yeah, I want to say 10 or 12. It was,
Wow.
one after another, because there were times you just, I had an idea of how it would work, but then, it was, and the thing that really, like Scott was asking, that little eighth of an inch was the thing that really made it work, because otherwise it was just not successful, and it just fought. So, yeah, there are times I have to explain this to my students, like, just don't turn in the first one you did, because it's going to look like the first one you did. So yeah, I did, 10 or 12.
What's the fabric? It's beautiful. Is it like a silk wool?
No, it's just a wool twill,
That's
a fairly
pretty.
loosely woven full. This was, because I get all sorts of stuff at FIT. They're always like throwing fabrics at us, and I figured, okay, well, it's pretty, and I think it's what I used for the samples for the article for threads. So
Yeah, that looks familiar. Yep.
yeah.
So
So,
Ken,
yeah, go ahead.
did they, for the airline stewardess, flight attendant uniforms, did they use that technique? I mean, did they use the couture techniques at that point for those
Well,
uniforms?
Balmain actually made their uniforms back then.
Yeah, but I'm just like, they weren't ready to wear. I mean, if they were using those buttonholes, that's not a button,
Right.
that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, back in the day,
I know, when you dressed up to travel. Yeah,
I when I go to the airport, because I remember when my parents went to
I
the
know.
Virgin Islands in 1967. My mother had a dress for the airplane. My dad wore his suit. She had her hair all done.
Mhm.
It's not like that now.
Yeah.
And so, but it was more expensive too. And TWA, have you been to it since they converted it to a hotel?
No, I have not.
It's pretty, they did a beautiful restoration. If you've not been there, it's
Yeah.
Arozarin and was the architect, and it's this very kind of 60s version of Jet Age,
Yeah.
and the materials were just first rate.
Yeah.
And the restoration was first rate. So they had this kind of display of flight attendants outfits from like the very beginning of TWA. It was quite wonderful. So yeah, because this was one of those, it was 2022, I think it was when COVID was still kind of a thing. And what really was frustrating, because my flight was delayed to freaking Buffalo. I could have driven there faster. And then they canceled the flight, so here I am at like 10:30 at night at the airport thinking, well, I'm going to call over to the TWA airport and just rent a room for the night.
Right.
And no one answered. I was like, what? You're a hotel next to an airport. You don't have someone. Yeah, I kept getting the voicemail, or you can make a reservation online. It's like, no, I just want to walk over there and get a room and put my head down. And as it turned out, what I ended up having to do, which I didn't want to do, is to get another car home and get another car back in the morning.
Yeah.
But so I had plenty of time to look at all of these flight attendants uniforms, and so that one especially spoke to me, because I thought, I'm going to figure out how to do that. And I think probably I'm pretty close to what they did originally.
Yeah.
So you may be guessing at this, but the tailoring method for that type of jacket, would this be something similar to your teaching us, you think?
It would be there's what's called a dressmaker jacket, and then there's the tailor jacket that we're doing. When the class I teach at FIT, it's a jacket and a skirt, and that's a dressmaker jacket. So what is probably under that outer fabric is it's probably interlined in a canvas, the whole thing. And there's shoulder pads, there is some structure, but it's not quite as bulletproof as what we're doing here.
Yes, I was
What is
surprised.
the place for that? Oh, go ahead.
What was the question? Vicky, did you have a
What-
question? Well, go ahead, Mary.
What is the place for that? And also, would you teach us that?
Well, the place for it is, ladies, as a rule, in tailoring, this kind of tailoring is one kind of thing. I would say probably for like business, like a business lady suit, that kind of thing. I think that the dressmaker jacket is a little more, it's a little easier to wear. Whereas, with the backstay and the canvas and the pads and all of that, you can use thinner materials. And so it is going to make it easier to wear. This is also a little bit lighter in weight. It's not quite as heavy on the hanger. And so will I teach it? That's a challenge, because there is, see you, Nina, take care. There is, because I teach the class at FIT. Now, I did all the videos. I hold the copyright. The challenge would be to the pattern is what's hard to get. So I think what I would probably have to think about is adapting those methods to this particular jacket, because I think sticking with this Jessica jacket, because if everyone has gone through all of the nosebleed to get the damn thing to fit, we might as well just keep going with that jacket, because then you have a jacket body that you can work with. And so, yeah, let me think about that, because
I mean, I really the buttonhole is fantastic, and I'm trying to think of places I could use it. Maybe even on a shirt jacket. That would be a lighter weight fabric.
you could try it, because this fabric was not all that heavy. I liked having a little bit of block fusing on the back. See you next time, Catherine. But or like a cardigan style jacket, because that's kind of what that jacket was.
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Yeah, it's what's nice is it's just a nice detail on its own. The rest of the jacket doesn't have to be all that tricky.
I agree.
Okay, so Sally, yeah. Oh,
I think Vicky was next.
Okay, so go ahead. Paula, were you
yes. I mean, I can see the detail in the buttonhole, which is very similar to the bound buttonhole.
Yes. They're cousins.
Okay, so what made it unique for this particular designer? Was it the fact that he took it all the way to the edge?
I think so. Yeah, it was. If you think back to the pattern envelope, it was kind of a graphic detail on the front of the jacket. So yeah, I think it was. He just liked that it went all the way to the edge. And I know that I've not seen this buttonhole in any other designer but him. It seemed to be something that he did.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Sally, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, you were talking about the tailor jacket versus the women's, jacket. I've oftentimes seen jackets that I would wear to work being called evening jackets.
Yeah.
Is that kind of that in-between spot, because it doesn't have a lot of the tailoring, but it's a little easier to wear, but at the same time, it's still, I would consider workwear.
Yeah. Well, workwear, evening wear, there's I've just heard it. I've heard them referred to as dressmaker jackets, because they have some structure to them. They have some body to them, but they're not quite as ponderous or intensive as what we've done here. So, you can adapt them for a lot of different purposes. I must confess, I have one black jacket that I really love the shape on it, even though the buttons it's a little bit tight around the middle, but I just don't button it. And it's a lady's dressmaker jacket. And it's really easy to wear. And, it just has shoulder pads. There are no backstays. There's no front canvas. I think probably for this, since it was a ready to wear, that the whole thing was probably block fused. It goes together fairly quickly. So, but there's a place for all of this. I think that the thing is, what serves you best in your daily life, in the different events and places that you need to go and do your life.
Yeah.
So, let me give it some thought about the dressmaker jacket, because I'm thinking like ahead. There's a part of me wants to run the raglan coat again, but I think everyone's done the raglan coat here. So I'd like to pick up other people for the raglan coat, but I can give that a rest for another time. But maybe in the fall, I'm gonna have to, because what I'm looking at now, I'm kind of pulling together the embellishment series, which is going to be 2 sections of 3, or you can buy all 6. Like it's one price if you buy separately, but it's a better price if you buy them all. And I have most of the videos. There are a couple that I want to add to it because I just think they're going to be easy they're easy and interesting. So yeah.
You be doing those in the fall?
Well, no, actually the embellishment, if you go on my website, I think I have that put up on the classes page now. So I have the date set. It's in June.
In June, okay.
Yeah, so we're now in May, so I got to get cracking on that. But I have most of it already. So yeah, you can go and have a look, and if you so choose. And I think it's on Wednesday nights again, because this seems to be a good night for a lot of people. So and there was a request for embellishments, and so and there is actually, I'm just looking at it right now. There is one embellishment thing that because Threads is, I don't know if they're ever going to do a second installment of the couture series, but I had prepared this because before the whole sale, I had a list of this is what we would like to do. And so what this is like 2 different treatments you can do to an existing garment. So it's not like you have to start from scratch, and it's a bead embroidery. So yeah, those are things I'm going to put into it, because it's just it's just fun. It's nice if you have clothes. It's nice to have, if you have something that needs a little zip, it's nice to be able to put something or do something to it that gives it a little more life.
Cool.
So Kenneth, will you be doing a pants or trousers class?
Construction or pattern making? Because I have a trouser construction that I haven't done for a long time. But as far as the drafting, I would refer you to Linda Maynard for drafting a trouser online. I like to draft trousers in person. I like to fit people in person. For me, it's easier and better, and I think I get a better result. Linda seems to be able to do it, and the people who take her classes seem very happy with it. So, but I did this, and I should actually trot it out again because it's been a while since I've run it, but it's like constructing a classic men's style trouser, fly front, side pocket, the back welt pocket, the waistband, the whole bit, I have it all. And so how I teach that one is I have a pattern. Everyone's working off the same pattern. There's no fitting. This is a sample garment. And so the pattern is a PDF that you would just print off, and then we like I have to look at it. I think it's 3 lessons. I'd have to look at it because it's been a while, but it's it is like constructing a classic fly front, classic side pocket, classic back pocket, the kind of the standard points and waistband, the kind of the things that you would normally construct in a men's trouser. So Paula, if you're thinking, if that's something that sounds interesting to you, that's something that I could offer in the future.
Yes,
so,
and will you give pointers as to the difference as we work along, the difference between the males and the females trousers other than the way that the fly fits or the way the fly faces, or they're made the same way?
But they're well, you know, you can lap. See, this is how my mother taught me. Women are always right. So women lap over the right, right over left.
Mhm.
That's why when I marked that jacket, I'm so used to making women's jackets that I marked the buttons on the wrong side. And I got to Jonathan's buttons, and she looked at me and she said, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Are you making this for you or for someone else?" And I said, "I'm making it for me." And she said, "So now, are you sure?" I'm like, "You're right." So they kept me from, you know,
Yes.
but really, other than that, trouser construction is trouser construction, whether it's ladies' trousers or men's.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Okay. So other questions before we sign off for the evening? Okay, then. So I think we're done for this evening. Let me turn off the recording because, you know, stop recording.